to the system because, yes, folks, the spoiler room is an hour early tonight, but there's a reason for that. We're covering a film that is extraordinarily long as we close out our dry month. And we're closing out dry month, and I am popping my favorite drink because I've ventured down the stairs to join my crew. Tonight, I am drinking Cider Boys Imperial Peach. I'm hoping one day to get that sponsorship. See, so, you know. But yes, thank you for venturing down the stairs, folks, to talk movie spoilers with us as we close out dry month, or dry month, as I misspelt it in the description for some of the streams. I apologize, but yeah,
I can't see it. Where is it?
I think I corrected it in most of them, but yes.
Okay.
Once Upon a Time in America, Sergio Leone film, and tonight I have I have a crew here, the good, the bad, and the good here. You can decide who. I wasn't going to call any of you ugly. I'm the ugly one. So, but here we go. First off, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Joe Randazzo, is back with us. How you doing, Joe?
Hey, everyone.
So glad to have you here. And he is back with us as well from You'll Probably Agree Reviews. It is none other than the one and only Mike Crowley. Hello, Mike.
Hey, how's it going, guys? My hair's gone. But
It's like
too.
See, the movie is so long that it caused a lot of his hair to just fall out. So the hair even got tired. So
yeah, I had to take some opioids to get through the length.
Really appropriate for this one.
You see what happens? He took some opioids, woke up short hair. So don't do drugs, folks. If you don't want to buzz
just
cut.
Go to a little Chinese shop and they'll give it to you.
They'll take care of it for you. And then my right hand man, he keeps coming back for more. It's none other than Ian Simmons. Hello, Ian.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, we're doing busy night. So we're going to talk about Once Upon a Time in America, and I'm going to give it to the man who it says he's very ecstatic about this film. He's very into this film. Joe, Mr. Synopsis Man, go for it, but mind you, we do all have to go to bed at some point.
I was going to say, we started an hour early, so let's get rolling. I'll take the first hour to tell you guys what this movie's about.
That's why we started early, just to get the synopsis out of the way. But
all right, David Noodles Aronson. He is wanted by the Combination, which is a group, a mafia gang. At the beginning of the film, they're looking for him. They show up at Eve's home, Eve's apartment first. Ask him where she is. Ask her where he is. She legitimately doesn't know. They shoot her. Something is up, man. He did something and he pissed off the wrong people. We go to Fat Mo's, where he is tied up and being strangled, and they're asking him where he is. When they put a gun on his mouth, he spills the beans. He's at the Chinese theater. And they go looking for him there, where he is smoking opium. And the Combination comes in and looks for him. And what happens from here? Is it necessarily reality? We start to unravel a mystery as 35 years later, Noodles has returned to Brooklyn, returned to Manhattan, returned to the Lower East Side, where he has received an invitation to a party. Some very high-rolling people are involved here. He doesn't know what's going on. All he knows is when he asks Mo, it's sent from the synagogue, but the synagogue sent the invitation or sent something out, sent letters out 8 months ago about retrieval of bodies, but somebody already spoke for the bodies of Max, Patsy, and Cockeye. So all he has is this invitation. He's certain that whoever sent him this invitation is behind the bodies being moved. And when he goes back to, oh man, I'm jumping way ahead here. I'm jumping like 2 hours ahead here, because this movie does not like to tell the story linearly. So I don't know if I should jump 2 hours ahead right now. We do flash back to the childhood of Noodles, where he met Max, Cockeye, Patsy, and Dominic. And I don't know, man. I feel like we should start discussing it from here, because from here I feel like I'm going to get into what I think is happening more than what is actually happening, because this movie leaves a lot for people to interpret. And I have my own interpretation, and whoever wants to. Is there anybody that hasn't seen it before?
Yeah, that'd be me.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
What do you guys think is going on? Because I can tell you what I think is going on, but I've seen this movie a dozen times. So,
yeah, I think I've seen it only. Yeah, go ahead.
As I was telling Mark before we got on the show, I got up at because I'm late always in doing my homework. I got up at 3:25 this morning to finish watching Once Upon a Time in America. It's a special feeling when you hit the hour 47 mark, which is usually the winding down / end time of many major motion pictures, and then you realize, oh, I still have 2 hours left to go. Wow. No, I didn't realize this was going to be one of those movies that's open to interpretation until after I watched it. And I think that's being very generous that it's open to interpretation. Another way of putting it might be this was kind of Tarantino before Tarantino, with the non-linear plot spanning decades and groups of characters and, points of view and all that other stuff. But I feel like it feels to me like no one ever wrote the story out linearly and then decided to break it up, because there's so much that just kind of falls apart towards the end. For me, anyway, on my first viewing, that I'm like, I don't know if or how this lines up. We lost Mike. That doesn't make any sense.
No, it does make sense. It depends on, if everybody's watching us from
Mike's back.
Opium Dead. There he is.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was playing with the setting.
Oh, no. No, I was saying that that none of it made sense, and then you disappeared. I said that doesn't make sense either.
I was just offended.
And I think there's a reason it doesn't make sense, and that's I think most of this movie doesn't happen. And I can go into detail with that later on, because what I think only is happening is the beginning of the film, where they're looking for Noodles smoking opium. And then I think this movie is a back and forth switch between being memories and a dream of something that I don't think ever happens. I think I could elaborate on that, because I everything that happens as far as the linear story up until the night of the Prohibition party and Max knocking out Noodles, I think that all happens. That's all Noodles' memory. I don't think anything that happens in the 1960s is happening. I think that's Noodles creating a story to cope with the fact that he accidentally, although he had good intentions, got all his friends killed. And again, that's my interpretation here. I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
Here's the thing, Joe. I hope you're wrong, because that kind of makes me mad. Yeah, I don't know. It's to me that it's no offense. I mean, you've seen the movie many more times than I have, and certainly you watched it way before, like yesterday and today. But it feels like an interpretation meant to paper over the fact that there's some serious problems with the structure and the screenwriting. It's entirely possible that you are correct, and I haven't read up on this movie. I just watched it. But there are some things that I could say are kind of dreamlike, such as the appearance of. I know we're talking spoilers, but I don't want to get too far ahead. But towards the very end of the movie, we see James Woods walk outside, and he's standing. There's a truck that starts up, and then all of a sudden, he's not around anymore, but he's not quite in the back of the truck, if you know what I mean. So I'm like, what's going on here? So I was puzzled while I was watching it, and I thought it was a bit of a mystery, a puzzle, but one that I don't think was well thought out. Now, your interpretation, it makes a lot of sense, particularly in light of that scene, but that doesn't satisfy me because I'm watching a straightforward historical drama that like plays with time, and then all of a sudden we get to the end, the filmmaker's like, but it was just a dream. It doesn't have to make sense, right? I'm like, no, that's not good enough.
Well, I don't think that's what he was doing. I don't. The film doesn't actually end on James Woods disappearing behind the truck.
It's towards. I mean, it's towards.
Yeah,
the end, right?
It ends on Noodles' face in the opium den.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes
and I think that's right. And I think that's a mistake because unless you are trying to bookend it and suggest that this whole thing is a dream. I mean, the very title of the film is "Once Upon a Time in America," which kind of has this storybook fairy tale quality to it. So maybe it's not real. But at the end, when we go back to that opium den, I'm thinking, okay, when the hell did this take place? Was it related to when we see him earlier in the film, or is it any number of other times that he was in this den because he frequents the place? I don't know where I am or what's going on. It does take on this weird Kubrickian quality where when he's meeting, I'll just say when he's meeting with James Woods in the last half hour of the movie, we're into like a cross between The Shining and the Stargate from 2001, where everything's just kind of gone wackadoo. We see an image of the James Woods character as his younger self, and I'm like, wait a second, I thought that was supposed to be his sister, and if that's true, you know, what's going on here?
No, she's Fat Mo's sister.
She's okay. That's Fat Mo's sister.
Yeah,
okay.
she was.
Deborah is Fat Mo's sister.
That's
right.
Okay, but then,
Peggy just lives in the building, and she's the one that hooks up with them for Charlotte Russe cakes.
No, I'm talking about the oh my gosh,
the actress
Deborah. Yes,
yeah, that's Fat Mo's sister who Noodles keeps watching.
Okay, right.
Through the he stands up on the toilet and looks through the peephole to watch her. She's grown up Jennifer Connelly.
Yeah, I know, but I got that much, but throughout the film, and this might have been a consequence of all the time jumping and the too many characters, I got this feeling that she was somehow related to Max, James Woods' character. I didn't think that when we first see her, but there's something to place that connection together. Maybe it's because it was the sister of somebody in this gang.
Yeah, it's the sister of Fat Mo. Jane. It doesn't help also that Max shows up with a woman who disappears after they carry the chandelier and the cop takes the watch.
Oh, the old woman, yeah.
Again, and we don't know who she is.
There's a number of things that either drop off or just magically appear. That
where did Eve come from? I'm to that very point, Mark.
Eve is just a girl that was hanging around, I guess, because we don't have any backstory on Eve. She just shows up when they're on the beach in Miami.
I know, and then she kind of becomes important to the story. Like, oh, that's the girl from the beginning. I assumed she had some kind of history of these people, but literally, and maybe again, Joe, to your point, this may lend credence to what you're talking about. Characters appearing out of nowhere, not making any sense to the overall narrative we've established. Okay, I'm starting to get more on board with this. I don't know if I hate the idea or if I just need to watch this movie like 3 more times. I kind of want to take the next week of work off to do that with like 3 notebooks and do it.
Let's go ahead.
Mike, what do you think? Fever dream? Is it reality somewhere?
No, I never thought it was a dream or anything like that. I thought that Noodles was just reflecting on his life. And, when you see him old and you go back to him being young, I think the idea was that was the only time he was happy. The only way he could be happy in a life that was completely miserable was just to take drugs and lie down and be in the moment instead of worrying about the people who are going to kill him. But I did read recently that people did have the theory that that some of it might be a dream. And Sergio Leone said, well, yeah, that was kind of the idea. So So I guess that was his idea. I never interpreted it that way. I think that's kind of stupid if that's like, oh, the whole movie was a dream. Like,
not
first
the whole
off,
movie. The 1968 sequences
the
are a
68
dream.
sequences.
Right, the 68 sequences.
That's how I see it anyway.
That's still really long.
I think everything else I think does actually happen in his timeline. And I think what happens at the end of the movie is he is completely high on opium, and the combination kills him right there in 1934. That's what I think happens. It does. I mean, it would happen after the events of the movie are over. But I think this is Noodle's last day on Earth, is what I'm thinking.
So it's like a Jacob's Ladder situation.
Kind of, yeah. I could see that, or was it hanging at Owl Creek or whatever it is, sort of
Currents
thing?
at Owl Creek Bridge, yeah,
Currents at Owl Creek Bridge type of thing, to where everything you see him escape, and then you see the things afterwards, just like in Owl Creek, where you have the guy living his whole happy life until the very, like, whoops, boom, no, wait, he actually,
I'm not sure if it was a dream, though, about the 68 stuff when he's an old man, because I always thought the whole point of the movie was about, it's kind of like the end of The Irishman, where you get older and then you regret everything that you've done in your life because it's led you to a certain point of misery. Even James Woods' character, Max, he ended up, despite gaining enormous wealth and power, he was miserable. I mean, probably because there was going to be an investigation after him that was going to kill him. But yeah, I always thought the point was, this is about a man reflecting on his life. And the whole opioid ending, I honestly never got it. I just thought, oh, maybe this is the only time he's happy. But to say it was like partially a dream, that I mean, the movie has a dreamlike quality, but I don't think it would correlate to the theme of the film.
Well, exactly. I'll throw this idea out to you. The score by Ennio Morricone uses a very popular 1920 Spanish song called Amapola, which means Pretty Little Poppy. And we see it. That's the song that Deborah's dancing to every time we see her practicing. It becomes part of her theme, even.
Well, that's the theme that even the guy on the whistle's playing.
Yeah,
he plays the whistle, which I dug quite a bit. I always like when they work the score into the movie.
Yeah, once he dies, we don't hear it anymore.
Yeah,
every other time that we hear the score, we never hear that anymore at all. So I think that's actually a nice touch too, because that kind of dies with him.
Watching the stuff out of order, I'm like sitting here going, though, I'm like, here, Nolan, follow this template, would you, for your historical films you want to do out of order? Because it gave me a little bit of feeling of that. I dug all the history stuff. I dug the backstory scenes. Yeah, the scenes that are supposed to take place in whatever 68 or whatever it is, do feel out of place and almost inserted. So I could see definitely where we're getting. I was hoping it wasn't a JR in the shower ending, though, just because what's funny is as I was getting towards the end and we get the Kaiser Sosa moment, which it totally is a Kaiser Sosa moment, where we get Max going, oh yeah, no, that burned body that you saw at the end that they tagged as me wasn't me, I'm me, and I actually took on the persona of this Bailey character. And I'm just like, well, now we're getting into some convolution going on.
If you'd like me to add to the convolution and why I think that this movie ultimately, I think when people say it's about trauma and about guilt and about regret, it definitely is. This is definitely Noodles. Excuse me. This is definitely Noodles recalling everything that's happened and regretting everything that he's done to lead him to this situation. But I feel like the stuff in the 60s, especially when you look at Elizabeth McGovern, or Deborah, really hasn't aged all that much. And there's the whole thing about, her playing Cleopatra, and age will not wither her. But I think that what we're seeing is Noodles is so remorseful because he has nobody now. The only other person who's alive He has Fat Mo, and he has Tuesday Weld's character, whose name escapes me at the moment. And she says right before, in their last scene together, we never liked each other anyway.
Carol,
that's it. We never liked each other anyway. He's raped Deborah, and she will never speak to him again.
Mm-hmm.
He's killed his 3 childhood friends accidentally. And I think what we're seeing is his traumatized send-off to Max, where, okay, he's trying to convince himself he's not dead. He's out there somewhere. He does say that to Deborah later on. He says that what kept him going was knowing that she's out there somewhere. And I think that this was him trying to convince himself that Max is out there somewhere. Max, he's the kind of guy that would fake his own death and just start an entire new life. And I feel like I feel like the life that he gave Max and the send-off that he gives Max is almost like a peace offering. Like, I'm sorry that I got you killed. And I would do anything to bring you back. I will give you all the money. I will give you my girl, even though it's not his girl. Yeah. But, Max does say, I took your money, I took your girl. And I think that in Noodle's dream, that's a peace offering. Like, no, you got to have everything, and you got to have a successful life. And I just went away because he's just feeling just so much guilt over what happened. And I think that that's what we're seeing here. I think it's just all trauma, all guilt. But yeah, there's so much more to talk about than just this ending too. So
yeah, and it's hard to feel guilt, but I think it was kind of the point of the movie is that it's hard to feel guilty for a rapist and a murderer. It's like, yeah, you've made bad decisions in your life. You grew up in the streets, but you still raped like 2 women. Although I think Carol was kind of like coming on to him. She wanted
that was a gray area. Carol's a gray area because I think that was part of the plan.
Yeah.
Carol's the gray area because she was kind of enjoying the excitement. So she was someone who maybe had a little bit of she plays the character anyway. Tuesday Weld plays the character up as if this is kind of a turn on almost to her, versus what happens with Deborah, which totally was not, which is interesting because here we get it's almost as if, because the movie's 3 hours and 49 minutes long, and we literally get the intermission first, like 2.5 hours in. It was like intermission, and I'm like, oh, now you give us the intermission. My bladder's already exploded if I'm in the theater because I had the super gulp. Oh, but now you give me it. And I already got my popcorn refilled twice.
And it comes right after he rapes Deborah and she leaves.
Well, it was before.
No, it's after the train.
Or is it after? It was just after. It was just after. That's right. Yeah, it was just after. So what's interesting about it, just before the intermission, we get the scene to where Noodles realizes he's losing Deborah, and so he never got to be with her. So he rapes her in the back of this car brutally.
After this great romantic evening where he opened up a shutdown restaurant for her.
Yeah, and freaking Sergio Leone doing this, asking Ennio, hey, play this beautiful song over the fact of she's getting, this horrific thing is happening. And it was almost like they put that point in there, though, because up until that point, Noodles kind of comes off as the good guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We know they're after him. We don't know why.
Right. But before, before Deborah goes, when he, up until the point of the rape or whatever, if you look at the way the context is, he's the guy who doesn't necessarily want to do the double cross for the diamonds. He's the guy that doesn't want to necessarily, do these things. We got to be our own. We shouldn't be joining up with these mafiosos. Let's do our own thing. He's this guy. So he's like the anti-hero type thing. Like, oh, yeah, I can kind of get behind Noodle. And then you're like, okay, no, I can't, because now he just, he just totally did this horrific thing that goes on for longer than I expected.
It's Leone reminding us these are not good people. It's like when Dr. Melfi got raped in The Sopranos. You know, like the whole point was she could have been a low life and reported to Tony what happened. And he could have killed her, but she took the higher road. People like Nucky, or not Nucky, but Noodles. He's not a good person. He's not someone to look up to. And that's why in that moment, it's like, yeah, you know, he seems sort of honorable, you know, like when he stabs the guy who shot his friend when he was a kid, which led him to go to jail. Like it was kind of a kill that was, you know, that had some necessity to it and emotionally for him. But he's not supposed to be a good man. And that was Leon telling us, you know, don't think these guys are cool. It's very,
Yeah.
It's very much the opposite of Goodfellas, where it's like you know they're scumbags, but they're kind of romanticized in a way, sort of like how the mafia is romanticized in The Godfather. And this is Godfather, but it's a reminder that no, these people are terrible.
Also, incidentally, it's rumored that Sergio Leone turned down making The Godfather to make this, and it couldn't get funded for 15 years. But while we're on the subject of sex and rape and all that, what a weird segue. The sex in every single. I mean, this also ties into why Noodles, after doing all this, he takes her out. He shuts down this gets this restaurant opened up just for her. He has an orchestra playing while they dance. Sex up until this point has been transactional in every way, and anybody watching this is not defense of the character, but I think that he sees at this point sex as transactional, whether it's Peggy with the Charlotte Russe cakes. Carol, I think, was in on the job. The prostitute when they first come get him out of prison, and I think he feels almost entitled to it. And also, it's the first time. It's kind of pathetic when you see him, when you see what he's trying to do with Deborah in the back of the car, because he's trying to be romantic while he's doing this. Like, he doesn't realize. I don't know if he fully realizes what he's doing is terrible. He's trying to like sensually grope her and like do all this stuff that I think to him is romantic. Whereas with Carol, he just straight up bends her over the counter, lifts up her dress, does what he's got to do. Peggy, they just get up there on the roof and they do what they got to do.
It's the Travis Bickle. It's the Travis Bickle scene. It's the Travis Bickle taking his date to the porn theater.
Yeah.
Because he thinks that's appropriate, because that's what he does. It's almost, and I'm not saying it just because it's De Niro, but it's very similar in that respect. I mean, this is more graphic and more traumatic and more extreme. Don't get me wrong, but it's still that character of, oh, this is what's normal to me because this is what's been normal all my life. And you go, no, that's normal. And it's not until way later that, well, not way later, after the act and everything, that Noodles starts to realize, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done this. Especially when he gives the money to the driver and the driver literally slaps it out of his hand and is like, get the fuck out of here, you psycho. And he gets in the car and drives Deborah away. I mean, he doesn't say that, but that's basically what he's silently saying.
I'm also wondering if this driver knows who he's dealing with at that moment, because he's dealing with one of the toughest gangsters in New York City at that moment. So, who's to stop him from pulling out a gun and just beating the guy's face in? But thankfully he doesn't.
Right, and that's where that, as much of that is as a rah-rah for the audience scene where he slaps the money out of the hand. I'm like, he knew what was going on in the back of the car when he was driving them around.
Right.
Yeah.
At no point, that wasn't the after it's over is not the moment to play the hero.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, it's cute, that little tag on the scene, but it doesn't make any sense.
No, it's valid, but
unless
it could
that's
be what
where
Joe
he was getting off anyway. Was that where he was dropping Noodles off anyway? Does he live in that area?
It was, but what I'm saying is, Noodles pays them and gives them the money. The guy slaps it out of his hand, but like that's I will not accept this indignity, you awful monster that was doing this 5 minutes ago while I was driving you around town, and clearly able to hear everything that was going on in the back seat.
Yeah, no, I get that too. I thought that was awkward. I mean, I liked the scene, but yeah, leading up to it, it's like, well, why didn't you stop it sooner, dude? that was my question.
Yeah, you could have tried to stop it as it was going on, but
yeah,
we might have another body in this movie then.
Well, no, I mean, it would have been, I think, as awful as it sounds to say, I think the driver should have just taken the money and gone.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to make a statement, find a different way to make it about people standing up to that kind of power, but do it in a way that is realistic to the world that you've painted. Because to me, I think, I keep wanting to call him Jimmy Conway because Treat Williams plays Jimmy Conway O'Donnell in this movie. And Jimmy Conway was also the name of De Niro's character in Goodfellas. So I'm all over the place here. But I think Noodles would have shot the guy if he had tried, except for the fact that he would have had to have driven himself home. But, you know, whatever.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's at least we get this moment of where you're like, hey, no, these are bad guys with this. It's tough to watch because the way Sergio Leone handles that whole scene too is handled the way it should be handled, but as an audience, you're just like, well, shit, is this going to stop anytime? Because it just keeps going for, you know, it's not a short
3 minutes, I think. Yeah,
it's not a short scene. No.
And I think the point was to make you uncomfortable because, like you guys said, this is the first time where you're seeing, you know, this guy who could be an anti-hero actually, you know, it's actually like spelled out for you. Like, no, this is not a good person. And
well, because Deborah is the first innocent.
She might be the only innocent, really.
Or the only innocent in this whole film. She's the only innocent, really, because everybody up until this point that Noodles has had interaction with have been in the underground, in the underbelly of society, in some way, shape, or form, either
or just profiting off of it, like
loosely or profiting off it, or loose tied. You know, he's dealing with gangsters. You know, the underbelly of New York. That's the only world he knows. Deborah is the only real innocent that he has any type of major interaction with. And, you know, and no offense to anyone, but I'm just going to say it. He learned from the streets. He didn't learn from the school or anything, because they didn't go to school. They learned from the streets as far as I could tell. So, you know, so they're learning from other gangsters. They're learning, you know, stuff from Bugs, you know, how was it Bugsy did business. Yeah. And then, you know, Max comes in, and I'm not going to go into fully the relationship between Max and Noodles of what could be implied there, but I mean they are very close to each other. I mean, and his friendship love for Max may be what also gets in the way of him actually having maybe a decent feeling, legitimate feelings for, you know, anyone else, for Noodles.
Well, I mean, he does call Noodles away twice when he's with Deborah early on in the film when they were kids, and both times she says, "Go on, your mother's calling you," kind of dismissively. But yeah, I mean, I think even more. Oh, sorry, kick the camera there. Even more than Deborah, I think his relationship with Max is the main one that we focus on in the movie. Anyway, it's the one that even closes the film. He kind of sees him as. It's odd because while they're kind of portrayed as though they're equals in the gang, you kind of get the idea that Noodles is going along with everything.
Oh, Max is the alpha of the group. He's the leader of the group overall. Even though it's equal for all of them, he's, you know, and Max at times when Noodles doesn't want to do something and Max has been doing business, he even passive aggressively makes Noodles feel almost guilty for not doing something yet getting the money that they all agreed to. Hey, if we ever do a heist or any money we make, we divide it up evenly among the five of us, always, forever. You know, hey, let's go. and he still kind of brings that power a little bit over Noodles, but Noodles accepts it. You know, he kind of goes along with it. He's a little bit you know, even when they do the diamond heist or whatnot, Noodles is like, yeah, we shouldn't be getting in with these mafioso guys from Detroit, and that we've got it pretty good right here. And Mac's like, no, we got to always think bigger. And that's what's interesting is Noodles doesn't think for himself.
Most of the time, no.
Most of the time. He doesn't usually think for himself fully. You know, I mean, the petty stuff, but like for like larger moves that he's always being told or following the group more so than, at least the impression I get. And again, this is only the first time I watch it. He seems to, whenever he tries to do something on his own, it goes horrible.
Yeah, I mean, well, he's very much a creature of passion. I mean, he's most of what we see are violent outbursts, sexual outbursts. I mean, he's a complete animal who at some point develops. I don't know if he's about as much of a voice of conscience of this group as possible. Like when he's talking to the one union guy is talking about bringing the gang in to do some stuff, and Noodles leaves, and that's where he takes the elevator and goes down to the lobby. Then Max follows him, and then we see Joe Pesci like going upstairs. What the heck? Why did Joe Pesci come back into this picture? Help me out with here, Joe. What was going on in that scene? I was completely lost by that point.
I think that's just showing that you know the way the unions and the mafia kind of started getting together, and when you have Max and Noodles leave, is when somebody who's even worse walks in. I think that was I think that was the point. I don't know that for a fact though.
And that's one of my frustrations with this movie. The thing is, I'm frustrated with this movie because I think there's some great performances. I love the settings. I love the commitment to building this time period. I mean, there's some shots of New York where I don't understand how they pulled this off even in 1984 as far as turning back the clock. But I feel like, yes, but I feel like if the people writing this, and there was a crazy number of credited screenwriters on that splash screen. I was like,
I could go into why that is later.
Well, but I feel like they should have chosen a lane. You either commit to the surreality of it, or you tell this in-depth story about these street kids who end up coming up through, working with the unions, and then the mobs who work with the unions, and really getting the mechanics of this, sort of like what happened in The Irishman, frankly. Or you just have it be about the street kids, and it was almost like a Bronx Tale. Another I've watched so many damn De Niro movies in the last month. I feel like I'm going to start going, as a matter of course. But that was a simple, street hoods and kind of morality tale. I think that would have worked here, because when they start getting into those deeper threads of how everything's connected, they just kind of forget to explain a lot of stuff. And what you said there, Joe, makes sense, but then I have to go back and think about what that actually meant. Whereas my initial problem statement with this movie, it felt like they wrote a whole bunch of stuff out of order, but never stopped to figure out how it would work in order or what things they needed to tidy up.
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, well, that makes sense, because although I enjoy the movie, I kind of feel like it's convoluted. It feels like a collection of ideas that are sort of slapped together and presented in one film. I mean, the movie's beautiful. It's very Italian. It's very expressionistic. You have long shots, matched up to Sergio Leone's score of people slowly staring at each other and turning and looking around. And it's meant to exercise your patience, but it's a different kind of mobster movie. But my problem with it is, like, I lose track of who's chasing who and for what. And I think it was because there was a whole plot line with the suitcase. And I know in the end, James Woods takes it for himself and runs off with it. But then you have like this huge length where it's jumping between, the present and the past, where it's like maybe it should have been told linearly, except the studios did do that in the initial cut of the film, you know, that failed critically and theatrically. So maybe it wouldn't work that way. But I think if they just toned down on some of the ideas instead of like going into like the millionth crime that they're gonna do, the movie would have been more concise.
Well, they did make it linear, but they also cut 2 hours out of it. So that could I've never seen that version. Well, I don't know.
There is the 4 hour and 11-minute version, which was shown at a fest.
I have a major problem with that, and that's that there's a scene where James Woods is meeting with Treat Williams after De Niro leaves Elizabeth McGovern, but before the reveal of James Woods at the window. So it kind of kills. It does kind of kill the reveal of James Woods. Because we see that he's alive now.
And also, I would imagine would kind of blow the mystique of this being kind of a fantasy sequence in Noodles' head. Because if we see, again, keep me honest here, Joe, having seen the movie far more than I do, when we see James Woods as the old man, we only see him in the context of Noodles interacting with him, right?
Yes.
So if there was a scene where Max and Treat Williams' character are meeting together, that would imply that that is actually happening in the real world, because it's not Noodles imagining something. Unless
or
Noodles
that he would have imagined that too, but then why? How would he imagine something that he had no part in?
Right.
Yeah. So,
and shout out to Treat Williams, woohoo! Our B horror, our B movie guy.
I love Treat Williams. It was so sad he passed away last year.
Yeah, our big B movie actor, actually in a big Hollywood production. Woohoo! Go Treat Williams.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great actors here who I think took lesser roles than they were used to just because it's Sergio Leone.
Well, yeah, I mean Joe Pesci is literally in one scene, and then two scenes, and then the very end, Danny Aiello literally called Police Chief Aiello.
Wow.
I think that was a happy accident, though.
Which I'm sure maybe it was. Maybe they did it on.
Then you got Burt Young in one scene where he's just like eating constantly, and then having dialogue in between it.
Well, and then,
that was a great shot with the jeweler's eye and the gun right up to his eye socket, man.
Yeah.
I was really on board with this movie for like the first, I want to call it 2.5 hours, and then it gets all kind of squibbly do. I'm like, you're kind of losing me here, gang. But up until then,
I think I'm with you. I was really into it, and don't get me wrong. Overall, I could see the film, and I enjoyed this quite a bit because I love kind of obscure films, but the part where it does kind of start falling apart for me is literally the hard cut. We go from, I forgot the exact scene. I'm sure, Joe, you could fill it in. There's a flashback scene where they're doing stuff. Maybe it was after the diamond heist. We cut to what is supposed to be the present, where Noodles is in mid-conversation with Carol, an old Carol, talking about the Bailey, and they walk across the thing that's the Bailey Institute or whatever, and they walk in front of the big picture where he sees Deborah. But it was jarring because we literally go from this like complete scene to suddenly like boom. I'm like, wait, they're in mid conversation. It's not like it's a start of a conversation, or like he shows up to the door and say, "Hey, how you doing?" and catching up with his old friends. There's literally, it felt like there was a scene missing to where he came to visit her, and instead it's just boom. Oh, he's with Carol, and Carol and him are talking, and that's where Carol drops, "Oh yeah, by the way, Max did this. He wanted you to kill him, yada yada." And I'm like, that was just jarring because up until like that point, even the cuts between present and past kind of flowed together. That came
right after the recontextualized opening, where you had the end of Prohibition party, and you have Noodles walking in the back. Mm-hmm. He tells Max he's crazy, and Max beats him with the gun, which sets up, because the whole time well, now, you know, once Carol drops the bomb on him, that, you know, maybe you guys should pull a heist and you guys should get arrested. But his whole intention is to get arrested with them.
Right.
And then Max loses his mind because Noodles says he's crazy and knocks him out. And that gives us the reason that he's not there when they all get killed. But yeah, then it does go right into Carol as an older woman who, again, her face hasn't really aged, which is another thing that gives me this idea that these are dream sequences, because or whatever you want to call them, dream sequences, premonitions, however you want to see it, is the faces of Deborah and of Carol really haven't aged at all.
Well, Carol definitely is much older. I mean, she's got like silvery gray
yeah,
hair.
But I mean, just her face though is I feel like it hasn't aged.
Not much. I would say with Carol, she felt like, you know, very similar as far as age range and such. With Noodles, she felt far more the look or what, she felt like she was that age more so than Deborah.
Deborah stays very young.
Deborah stays very young until she completely wipes the makeup, and then she does show a bit of her age in her face, but not nearly as much as nearly everybody else he visits, from Fat Mo to Carol to, you know, all the other people he visits. You know, they all look similar to Noodles' age, and Deborah's the only one who doesn't really look like she is close to Noodles' age at all, even when she does wipe the makeup off. But she's mostly in that makeup to where she's still very young looking in that makeup, which, you know.
And I mean, she is. Oh, you go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, she does. You know, that makeup is very, very doll-like.
Yeah.
And it just kind of reinforces. I mean, I'm falling more into line with Joe's point of view, or the interpretation as being a dream and more representative of reality rather than reality, because she is more of an object. I mean, he's kind of fetishized her and you know, treated her like a thing that he wants for the entire time that they've known each other. Yeah, there's that really weird scene towards the beginning where he's watching her in the, you know, from the bathroom peephole, all, you know, a la Psycho, and she actually changes clothes, and we see. I assume that was not Jennifer Connelly. That had to have been an of-age actress, because my goodness,
yeah,
because that was. Yeah. But when you stop and think, like, oh, okay, I guess it's realistic, but you know, it's still she
awkward.
12 then or something. Yeah.
This movie's kind of perverted. Every time you see a woman in the film, she's like a sexual object. Like there's that one scene when he's walking, when he just gets out of jail, he's walking towards the car with James Woods. He opens up the door and there's like a naked, like dead body in there, and she's like, "I'm here for you," you know, and then she fucks him. And then let's see, you got Deborah, who's raped. You get Carol, who's semi-raped, who is just kind of a crazy thrill seeker. And then you got Peggy, was that her name? And then you got Peggy, who would just, you know, screw every kid as long as they gave her like a pie. Which that scene, idea. Why was Noodles eating the pie when
well, that wasn't Noodles.
That was Patsy.
That was Patsy.
And I think what that's meant to represent is that these are very poor Lower East Side kids. He buys this thing to give it to her, but they're not used to treats.
Yeah,
well, they don't really have. And I think he just, scoops up a little bit. Oh, this is actually pretty good. He ends up eating the whole thing.
That was a great scene, because I think that was very honest about, like, you know, not so much the poverty level adds a dimension to it, but just like kids, you know, I'll just take a little bite and then see if you can take a little. You could tell he was trying to get a little bit of the base, like the crumb, without like having the whole thing fall apart. He's like turning it around and looking at all the angles, and then eventually he's just like, "Fuck it, I'm going to eat the entire thing." And I love that she didn't seem to notice that he had like this dollop of whipped cream on his mouth when she finally comes out into the hall. So good.
Well, look at the age of Patsy too, though. He's
definitely on the younger end of the group.
He is just, I would say he's just getting to potential puberty here, and
well,
so
he's buying a cake so he can have sex. I would assume puberty's happened.
But the thing is, I got the impression from this scene he doesn't exactly know actually what he may be getting himself into, because he mentions he heard the guys talk about what it would cost to have sex with her, but I don't think he actually knows. He knows the word. He doesn't, I think, know what the full act maybe mean. I mean, maybe he does, but even still, you're looking at him going, okay, even if she did accept it, he would have, you'd be lost. Okay. I mean, he just,
well, Mark, I think there is some credence to what you're saying there, because if he did have any idea what that was about, there's no way he would have eaten that cake.
Right. Well, there's that too. There's that too. He's still on the younger end. He heard them talking about it, and I think he wanted to try. It was the act of giving her the treat for something, I think, more so than what the treat was, what the transaction was purchasing, basically, for lack of a better term.
And even the more, if we're going to call them that, mature members of the gang, when they get up there with her, Noodles goes right away. And there's something that is we don't really talk about. It's not really mentioned much, but there's the idea. The idea's been in my head that Max is impotent. And that could be why he's always so angry and so wanting to be dominant and wanting to just keep, everything to keep escalating. Because she's telling him, he's like, oh, it's because they're talking over there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think maybe Max is impotent because he can't have the one person he really wants, and that guy is always messing around with the skirts. No, it's really interesting because you talk about the age of these kids. You see the markers in the mausoleum, and two of them were born in 1907, and one was born in 1911. 05, and then two in 05 and one in 07.
Yeah, Dominic was the youngest one. He's the one that dies as a kid because he's shot. He's like the baby of the group. Because I think,
he wasn't in the
mausoleum. Oh, was he? Yeah, that's right. He wasn't.
Right. But yeah, so these are all very young kids. Because and that's the other. I'm trying to figure out the timeline of this thing, because I think Noodles went away for they mentioned how many months it was, and it's something like 11 or 12 years he was away.
It was 10 years. I think it was a little over 10 years he was away, because she mentioned counting the days. Yeah, and she said something like 3,600 and some. Oh no,
she lost count at 3,000. It was 4,000 and something.
Okay,
yeah. So yeah, it was like 11 years.
Yeah, he's gone for a good chunk of his. Yeah.
So I don't know how old they were. The other thing, and this is almost like the reverse Irishman problem, because when Noodles gets out, he's supposed to be, let's just say, early 20s. If I'm being generous, and so is everyone else in the gang. I'm like, no, these people all look like they're pushing 40, and I can buy that, but at least they didn't try and do the CGI acting thing. I mean, it's just one of those puzzlements. I get it, because you got De Niro and Woods and all these headlining guys, but they also had younger actors playing them as kids. They didn't. The Irishman thing I mentioned, if this had been Scorsese, he probably would have tried to CGI them so that De Niro is actually playing himself at 12, kind of like Little Man or something like that.
Although it's much more convincing watching a 35-year-old Robert De Niro playing older and trying to step up on the toilet to look through the peephole when he's when he's in his 60s versus the Irishman.
Yeah. That's when he's kicking the guy outside the store and can barely move.
No, I mean that's the thing is I feel like old age makeup has taken several steps backwards since this movie came out. I mean, it's quite remarkable.
They all look like they did later on.
They did a good job.
Like he looks in this movie. Robert De Niro looks like he looks at the end of this movie.
Yeah, minus a few pounds, he looks like Robert De Niro now. I was surprised by the makeup. I don't know what James Woods looks like now, but is probably
not that different.
Not that far off.
just
Actually,
white hair
he doesn't look that different from his Bailey persona that we get later on. He doesn't look too much different from him.
Yeah.
I mean,
just put some glasses on him.
well, there used to be the artistry of making people old age. I mean,
Mhm.
my buddy who was in theater class, that was one of the first makeup tests they did for one of their like midterm exams or whatever, was making someone look older or making yourself look older. I mean, there was an art to that, and a lot of times it worked, and in this one it works really well. Yeah, when we meet the older versions of everybody, it feels like they like 30 years have passed.
And to be fair with Elizabeth McGovern, she still looks very youthful even today. So
you know, and I want to know whoever, I mean, I hope the person who did the casting got a bonus. I really do, because whoever they got to pick the kids, especially a young De Niro, that kid, when he puts on the mask, when they do the diamond heist, and he puts on the mask, you just look at the eyes of the young, you know, not the diamond heist, but when he's younger, you know, and you can only see the eyes in the hole, the peephole or whatever.
Yeah,
it looks like De Niro.
Like
a young De Niro. I'm like,
and they lucked out because Leone told them he didn't want professional actors for those roles. He wanted kids from the neighborhood, kids who grew up on the Lower East Side. So they really lucked out. They found a kid who looked that much like a young Robert De Niro.
Yeah, and who could act. I mean, that's surprising that they weren't professional actors, because that gang uniformly was very good, and they didn't feel like they were child actors. The one thing I would say is the first time we see the young De Niro, I think it's a close up of the eye, and they see the mole. It looks like a damn raisinette on his cheek. There's something the way the light hits it looks like chocolate. I'm like, no, get that thing off. Yeah. But no, it's weird because I'd never realized how much a young Jennifer Connelly looked like she could grow into a young Elizabeth McGovern, because when we first see Deborah as an older, lady, mid-20s, I guess, the resemblance is uncanny. Like, you can see that direct line. You can almost superimpose and fade those pictures in front of each other. It's awesome.
Well, Jennifer Connelly and James Russo were the only two professional actors, I think, in those those youth scenes. And James Russo is, he's somebody else. He's only got 2 scenes, but as Bugsy, he makes it work.
Yeah. A bit of trivia that I picked up on. There's another movie that came out 6 years after this one, in which William Forsythe and Jennifer Connelly also appeared together, but had no scenes together. What was it? No looking.
Wait, how many years later?
6 years later, so 1990. A 1990 movie with Jennifer Connelly and William Forsythe. William Forsythe, 1990. Mobsters. I don't think that. No, nope. She wasn't in that. Jennifer Connelly wasn't in Dick Tracy either. Trying to think of 1990 William Forsythe movies now, and I cannot.
The most iconic Jennifer Connelly image perhaps ever. Does that help?
Oh, Fast
Rocketeer?
Fast Time? No, that wasn't.
No, that was 85.
Career Opportunities.
Career Opportunities. Oh, yeah.
The tank top and
the famous. Is that the one with the famous riding the horse?
Yep.
Yeah.
He played the manager. He played the manager of the Target that Frank Whaley worked at. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. It'd be great if I actually saw that movie.
And Jennifer Connelly was in another
Career Opportunities.
No.
Oh, change that.
Mm-hmm. She worked with another great Italian director that year, because she was in Dario Argento's Phenomena the same year.
Yes.
Yes, she did.
That's also 84. But yeah, and I think she's fantastic in this too. And I don't think she gets enough credit as a child actress for how good she is and how convincing she is. And there's that really sweet scene where they're alone together in her place, and she starts reading the Song of Songs to him and kind of modifying it to kind of poke fun at him a little bit. And I think that she's the only one. And again, maybe even this at this point, I like to say that everything up to everything that happens up until James Woods hits him with the gun and all that. I like to say is reality, but maybe this is even a skewed reality. That she's always that she does love him, she does care about him, and she does see something in him that he could potentially turn straight and not go into a life of crime. She's the only one that seems to have that kind of belief in him.
Well, it is a skewed reality because we're seeing these memories through him, through Noodles the whole time.
In an opium days.
The way this film, well, even cutting out the opium in general, he's remembering how he remembers things. So everything we see, even in the past, is from Noodles' perspective. So whether or not that is exactly how things play out, we're not sure. But it's how he remembers them. If you want to go that far, I don't know if you want to
definitely
go that deep dive with it.
The first time he sees Max riding in on the back of the cart, it looks almost like he's sitting on a throne with a crown on.
Right.
So he sees him immediately as like some kind of king. So. Yeah, you could go that far. I think you can to a point.
Yeah,
every woman loves his dick. Apparently, every woman.
Apparently,
the prostitute. They're like, "Hey, you want to come into the club for a little pick me up?" No, I got mine.
Yeah,
So I think there's that aspect of it too.
One of the things that was interesting that I thought played out, and this is a testament to James Woods. I mean, regardless of some of the other films he's been in, James Woods, I think he's a working actor, but he does a little bit of a nuance thing in here that I thought was what I enjoyed was the fact, and maybe this alludes to the fact that all the memories we're seeing too are since they're from Noodles' perspective, they're skewed. But I was waiting for the moment when Max steals Deborah, or legitimately, not in the future but in the past or whatnot, or does some other thing to try to get rid of her, because every single time he sees Deborah with Noodles, he looks pissed and jealous at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the way James Woods plays it. And I'm imagining, I'm sure that's the way it was directed, but whatever that implies, he always looks like he's either jealous or angry or both whenever he looks at Deborah, and especially when Deborah's next to Noodles and they're just talking.
Well, yeah, I think she probably could have in the right situation, excuse me, in the right situation, got Noodles to give up crime. And there's that time when they're in the restaurant right before the rape scene, where she talks about how she does care about him, but she says, and she correctly guesses that if they did have a relationship, you would be the kind to just kind of lock me away and throw away the key. And that's not who she wants to be. And even at the end, even in their last scene together, he comes back. And God, this is another thing that makes me think that the 68 sequences are all a dream. She's almost forgiven him for it.
Yeah, that was the weirdest thing. He literally shows up at the door, and I'm like, okay, this scene is extremely awkward because 99.9999999% would have picked up a glass vase and thrown it at him and said, get the fuck out of my dressing room before I call someone to get you out of my dressing room.
But and then not only does the whole conversation seem forgiving, there's the end of it when young David, who is now Max's son, who is played by the same actor who played the young Max, knocks at the door. She freaks out. Do not come in here. I don't want you. Just wait out there. Please don't come in here. And that's when now she's flustered. Now, when she's lying, she can't act anymore. And Noodles points out, now you're being a terrible actress. And there's this scene, this really tender moment right at the end, where she looks at him and and you know, it's just after she takes off her makeup and she looks at him and she says, "Age can wither me. We're getting old. All we have are our memories. If you show up at this party on Saturday, you won't even have those anymore." And then she points to the back exit and tells him, "Take it, get out, and don't look back." And he asks her, you know, like, "Lot, am I going to turn into a pillar of salt?" And she says, "If you walk out that door, you will." And it's not only that she has forgiven him, which is again why I think this is absolutely a dream sequence. But she cares about him so deeply that she knows if he walks out there and sees the spitting image of young Max, it's going to destroy him, and she doesn't want that. And when he does choose to walk out that door, and she does stand beside him, she says, and again, another line that I think shows both Max and Deborah do love him. She says, "His name is David, just like you." So that to me means Max. He had such a Max loves him so much, and even forgives him, that he's named his only son after him. So that's why, to me, everything that takes place in '68 is all just guilt and trauma, just kind of mashed together. And it's De Niro, it's Noodles thinking, Max is out there. He's going to forgive me because he always does. I didn't mean to do this. Max knows what his Noodles knows what his intentions were, you know, by calling the police. And he was going to be there with them to get snitched. It's about survivor's guilt. And I think that when he sees Max, just, you know, and these are like 10-minute dialogue scenes, by the way, because I went back and I timed them today because I looked. I'm like, he walks into Deborah's dressing room 3 hours and 13 minutes into the movie. He goes, he leaves 3 hours and 22 minutes into the movie, or something like that. And then 3 hours and 24 minutes, he starts talking to Max, and that scene goes on until like 3 hours and 30. So I'm like, he's ending with 10-minute dialogue chunks, which I guess you kind of have to nail this home because there's a lot going on. But then when he sees Max, you know, Max tells him, "I would only accept it from you," as he's handing him the gun. Because he's like, "I'm dead already. And if I'm going to die, I want it to be," not saying it directly, but the implication is, if I'm going to die, I want it to be somebody I love and somebody who I feel I owe a debt to.
You know, I get that. My whole problem with the Max and Noodles encounter at the end is Max, or Bailey, or whatever he's calling himself nowadays, is so ridiculously wealthy that I don't know what prevented him. I mean, we're talking 1968, allegedly. This is pre-internet. It was fairly easy to disappear if you wanted to. He could have taken all that money and disappeared into Costa Rica and lived in a villa somewhere. You know, hired some security in case anybody got any ideas. I mean, yeah, he was able to find.
Maybe he does at the end because he just disappears in the truck. We don't see him in the back of the garbage truck.
Well, but I mean, like, unless he hopped onto the side and was like, I could just imagine him riding on the side of the garbage truck, but in his tuxedo to make his getaway. I don't know what was going on with that garbage truck scene. The only thing I got out of that was this incredible transition between the rear lights of the garbage truck, the red lights disappearing into the night and becoming the white lights of the oncoming car of the revelers who are coming up the same road. I mean, you're talking about movie magic. That was perfect. But it's also interesting that in those kind of back-to-back scenes, you've got two characters offering Noodles kind of a secret backdoor out. You know, you've got Deborah saying, "Here, you go out, you go out that door. Don't go out the main door, but go out that way." And then you've got Max opening up the Bond villain bookcase entrance in his study.
But what does that tell you? That tells you they're trying to give him an out, and that's why I think this is a dream. They're both trying to give him an out.
Well, it's also I think if you want to make this a rule of three situation, you've also got in the beginning of the movie, the setup for this is Noodles getting tipped off that people are coming for him in the opium den, and what does he do?
He goes out the back door.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
I'm leaning more towards now too that, and it's, I think part of my brain was rejecting the fact that it might have been a whole fever dream, even though we get the classic freeze frame at the end of the smiling De Niro after he takes a major hit of the pipe.
I don't think he's going to be smiling for much longer.
No, but
I think he's dead within minutes.
Well, that's that's the thing, is because he takes such a hit as well. And that was the thing, is I was watching it, I'm like, again, when up until we get to that hard cut where I mentioned the Bailey Institute, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm rolling with this for sure. And then the minute we hit that, I've watched too many movies in my day. I'm like, this is going to be a fever dream, isn't it? This is going to be back to the opium. And then we're watching it play out. And then we watch the last flashback, which is the last scene with Noodles, where we see how he first gets into the opium den. And when the guy packs his opium, he takes a major hit. I mean, this guy, Noodles, takes a serious hit.
That was a long pipe.
It was a long pipe, but
and to get back to our previous context, I'm pretty sure the name of that pipe was Max.
But oh no, there's that implication as well, that they do truly love each other, and that's why they can't really have these relationships with these.
Wow,
ladies.
I never thought about them being in love with each other like that.
Well, Ian brought it up earlier. It might be kind of one-sided. It might be
right.
Max is into Noodles, but
yeah, exactly.
I also put their dicks out around each other a lot.
They do that.
No issue when Carol.
Yeah, but she's just examining them like it's a whorehouse. Yeah,
well, it is.
Yeah, no offense, guys. I love you all, but we are never going to be in that situation again.
We are on camera, but I don't want to get banned from YouTube. But
given the number of times you've said the R word tonight, gentlemen, I think Mark's going to get an email tomorrow.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it is integral to the plot, though. So
yes, yeah. I mean, we're not sensationalizing or anything. We are wholeheartedly condemning this monstrous act. But no, I like the. It was interesting the jealousy kind of angle between Max and Noodles might not have been suppressed romantic feelings, but this idea that Max is very much the businessman who's all about like ascending the rungs of power and getting what he thinks is his. And so Deborah is a distraction to that. So Max is constantly calling him away from her because it's like, look, get your head in the game. We got to talk business over here. Dames are one thing, but business is another.
And honestly, you're the only one of the three that are with me that I think could actually be a real partner, because the other two are both always fucking off.
Right. Yeah. And also oh my gosh, I totally lost. I was going to say something. I lost it. It'll come back to me. But no, it's their partnership is always kind of.
Were you going to mention the scene with Carol? Is that what you were going to transition to? Was that it?
How did you pick up on that?
Because the movie does work in that way. It does.
Well, the scene with Carol in the office, right, where he's like screaming at her. Yeah, and it's funny because I was thinking about our was it 2 months ago now, we were talking about the women who are trying to make it up in the ranks of like the underworld. I got so many vibes of that watching this movie when Carol kept showing up in the room. She went from being the victim in the bank or the diamond heist to kind of being in on it with the guys in the speakeasy to, now she's in the room where they're making plans. I thought this was going to go in a whole different direction. I mean, I like what we got, but yeah, I was just thinking about that whole motif, Mark, and some of the great performances we saw in those movies. So it's all of a piece.
She's also supposed to be the woman in the cock insurance story.
Yeah.
Yes, that makes sense.
Because Burt Young tells him
that's the one that the
go easy on the girl. I am telling you, go easy on the girl.
That's because the mafioso had relations with her, and that is Carol, and that's what surprised me when she showed up. I'm like, okay, the Joe
the Detroit mob sent her in.
The Detroit mobsters didn't have a problem, but again, they didn't quite see her as integral. And her having a relationship with Max, that was another one-sided thing. Max Max is a lonely guy, is what it is. And the thing is, Max also wants power, so he needs to be a hard nose, and he needs to be the, as I mentioned earlier, the alpha, the kind of the leader, the dominant one, in whether or not it's his relationship with Carol or with Noodles. But it's almost like he's going through the motions, like he's really trying, like that scene with Carol where he's just yelling at her, and she's like, she kind of walks off like, yeah, okay. She's not really intimidated by Max. And, you know, and the dynamic between these three actually is very interesting, because Max, I think, again, what we're talking about, you know, it may not even be jealousy. It may be fear with Deborah, because it's fear that if he loses Noodles, he'll be alone, because him and Noodles have been, you know, Noodles came up with the idea with the salt bag, right? And Max sold it to the guy. So these two are two peas in the pod that work well together. And Noodles is the idea guy. Max is the action guy. And so if he loses Noodles, you almost get the idea, and it's proven, maybe this is part of it. It's proven at the beginning or middle and end where Max, two other guys, childhood friends, all die because Noodles wasn't there to actually give him the proper plan. Because Noodles is kind of the brains of the operation, more or less, as far as ways out so that they all survive.
Well, I mean, Carol says it, you know, when the cops pulled up, Max went crazy and started shooting and got everybody killed, because Noodles, I guess, could have a calming effect on him. Whereas the other two, I mean, you want to talk about brain dead. The other two are, you know, Patsy and Cockeye. They ain't figuring out shit. Those guys are just,
those characters are kind of interchangeable.
What's that?
Those characters are kind of interchangeable. They're kind of like they're like the Merry and Pippin of the gangsters in the movie.
Although the actor who plays Patsy when he's a little older, it's kind of sad. This was his final film. He passed away. He was working on God, what was that Pacino movie with the heroin addict? In '83.
Oh,
I can't remember the name of it, but he was playing a heroin addict, and he died of a heroin overdose while they were filming that.
Wow.
And, this wound up being his final release film. He was only 27. So his last two films, he worked with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. So.
Wow. Well, that's a good way to go, though.
Hey, we've actually got a viewer comment that says the director's cut is the fucking best. And, you know, I haven't watched
the same guys last week, Richard. Are you talking about the 3-hour, 49-minute version, or are you talking about the 4-hour version?
I think it's the 3-hour, 49-minute version.
Yeah,
I think that's the one that's the most accessible of the film, of the versions. That's the one that's most accessible.
I was going through Rotten Tomatoes today, and I was looking at the negative reviews, and a good chunk of them were like, 140 minutes of my life wasted. I'm like, these are reviews from like back in like 1984 when the film was released theatrically. These are all newspaper reviews from '84.
So the 84 theatrical cut, my understanding, it was told linearly, and they took out 2 hours of it.
Yeah. I've never seen it, so I don't know what got taken out.
Look, at some point, I feel like we should come back and watch that theatrical just as like a science experiment, because I can't even imagine how that would work. I mean, I know I was advocating for something more linear, but I don't think you can have a linear story that also cuts out half of the movie and have it make any kind of sense. So now I'm curious. I want to see this.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess it removes a ton of its meaning.
I think so too.
I'm not, especially it being linear. I mean, you know, I don't mind the jumping around, because for the most part, until points we've already mentioned tonight, you know, it's followable at least. And that's why I joked at saying, hey, Nolan, maybe you should have taken this when you did Dunkirk. And, you know, because they at least, it flows nicely as far as from the past to the present. I mean, we go through 3 different time periods. We go through the kids, we jump between the kids, the 60s, and then we go to the where they're in their 20s, quote unquote, or whatever. You know, we jump between those 3 periods, but what happens kind of flows into the other for the most part for the majority of this runtime. And I can't see how, and it gives the other scenes more impact. They all play off each other a bit for this buildup. If anything, the only scenes that feel, and maybe this is in the 4-hour and 11-minute version, the only scenes that I think feel a little bit disjointed are when we get into the union parts with Treat Williams. That seems that's a little bit to where it feels just a little bit. It doesn't flow.
It slows the movie down.
It does.
Yeah. Well, there is, like I mentioned, there is a final scene between Treat Williams and James Woods.
James Woods, yeah.
And God, it's been a couple years since I've seen it, but if I remember correctly, it's Treat Williams basically telling him that he's going to die. From what I remember, at least, it's been a long time since I've seen those deleted scenes. So there is an end. There's a finality to that, and it's that Jimmy Clean Hands is not really clean anymore. And that's the reason De Niro scoffs when he's at the lunch counter talking to Mo, and he goes, "Oh, him, I know. Yeah, he's supposed to be clean, whatever." And he makes a comment about it. There's a scene at the cemetery with Louise Fletcher that's gone, and I do not remember anything about the context of that scene. I remember writing something about it at the time where I said it was nice to see Louise Fletcher, but it really didn't matter. The scene ultimately didn't matter. And I don't remember what else was missing. But the Treat Williams James Woods scene, I felt, and maybe this is why it was cut ultimately in the version that's now the standard, is that it does kind of kill the reveal that Senator Bailey is Max, because you see him sitting there with Jimmy Conway O'Connell.
Yeah, O'Connell. Yeah,
something like that.
Jimmy
Jimmy Conway O'Donnell.
Yeah.
You see him sitting there and discussing all this. They're on the Blu-ray. If you have the Blu-ray, the deleted scenes are on the Blu-ray. I did not have a chance to revisit them today. But
Clint Eastwood reportedly turned down the role of Jimmy O'Donnell.
Oh, this movie went through a lot of casting. Originally, it was supposed to be Gerard Depardieu as Noodles. When it was
John Belushi. Wait, hold up. Really? John Belushi was offered the role of Max.
I didn't know that one. That one's new to me.
But he died.
That wouldn't happen for obvious reasons.
But he died before auditions began.
Yeah.
This movie must have been in development for a while then.
Oh, it was in development before The Godfather, because Leone was offered The Godfather and he didn't want to do it because he was trying to get the movie off the ground. What the hell? All right. Armin Milchan, the producer, is at the Cannes Film Festival, and according to him, he's walking along all the rows of hotels and everything, and he looks up on the balcony and he sees Sergio Leone sitting on the balcony. He walks up to Sergio Leone and he tells him, "Maestro, whatever you want to do, I'll fund it." And apparently he pulls out I think it was something like 500-page screenplay for this. Something along those lines. It was some insane amount of
317 pages long, according to trivia in October 1981.
And here's why, if you guys have a little bit of issue with the dialogue. Okay, so you've all seen screenplay format in the United States, the slug line. In Italy, it's done where on the left side is all the action and on the right side is all the dialogue. Right. The screenplay was apparently almost all left side. It was all action with no dialogue. The reason you have all these writers is because Sergio Leone then got Franco Ferrini, Ernesto Gastaldi, and all these Italian writers who, Ian, you probably know from covering all these giallos. And he basically, and this is apparently, I think it was Franco Ferrini that said that Leone had it planned out. He had the movie visualized to such a degree that he'd be like, "I need you to write something that's going to be long enough for for Treat Williams to walk this amount of time because he's going to be walking from here to here, and I need him to say something. And that's why the dialogue apparently seems disjointed at times. But also, this is I think it was Franco Ferrini that told the story, so I don't know if it's necessarily completely accurate. But the crux of it is, the screenplay was all left side, almost all action with very little dialogue.
Yeah.
So
it is, and it's based off of the book The Hoods, which apparently there is an actual Noodles. There was an actual Noodles in real life that De Niro met at some point. But get this. Here's this. Imagine this. 1975, October. Sergio Leone declared that the cast would feature Gerard Depardieu as David Noodles, Richard Dreyfuss as Max, with James Cagney playing Old Noodles and Gene Gabin playing Old Max. However, Cagney and Dreyfuss, while flattered, Cagney had trembling hands, and Dreyfuss said, "Yeah, this doesn't feel like the right moment for me to do a film like this." So it went, 9 years in development before it actually was made into a movie. Hollywood.
Megalopolis was in production for how many years? Like
20 years.
Well, it was. I mean, I don't know when he
before
first.
that even. It was
no
like
spoilers for anybody who's seen it. I haven't seen it yet.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm not gonna spoil the movie.
I heard it's terrible.
Because of the casting, because it went so long. Do you want to know who they wanted to get in 1980?
Paul Newman.
Hey, for Old Noodles, it was Paul Newman and Tom Berenger as a young Noodles. The role of Max going to Dustin Hoffman, William Hurt, John Voight, Harvey Keitel, or John Malkovich. Liza Minnelli would have been Deborah, and Brooke Shields would have been a young Deborah, and Claudia Cardinal would have been Carol. Look at
Claudia Cardinal I knew about because De Niro really wanted to work with her.
Yeah. Look at Ian. He's like,
but you know what? It works because just think about this: Tom Berenger instead of Robert De Niro. You know?
No, this is why it's.
The casting worked out perfectly.
Yeah, although I would have loved one thing, but the results are great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes patience is a virtue, and I think it is in this case because I cannot. No disrespect to Tom Berenger and Richard Dreyfuss and all these guys who I adore in other movies. Yeah, I don't think it's like when I watched the original version of Heat, the made-for-TV movie that Michael Mann did that Heat eventually grew out of, and everyone complains about the acting, and that I'm like. You had De Niro and Pacino in Heat. So you had two other guys who you never heard of and, are never going to hear of again in the original version, LA Takedown, that's the name of it. So I'm like, when you end up with somebody of that caliber, you end up with, the greatest actors of your generation. And even James Woods is great here. But he's always good at playing a scumbag.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. He doesn't have to reach far for it.
We're gonna pull over for a moment. Talk to Richard Yu here, who's left comments. He says he's seen the 4-hour version, which he really enjoyed. The theatrical cut is shit.
Oh yeah,
don't even waste your time.
Oh, I will.
Theatrical version came out when Richard was 7. And he recently saw the 4-hour version on Hulu, apparently. So I'll have to
wait a minute. The one Mark's talking about, which restores the Treat Williams James Woods scene at the end, and is that the one you're talking about? Because I've seen those scenes on their own. I've never seen them cut back into the movie. I didn't know that version would exist.
Yeah, I was.
So yeah, if you can get back to us, Richard, I'd love to know if you saw that version because I feel like that would grind it to a halt.
Yeah,
the version we're talking about is a 3-hour and 49-minute version, which I think is the version you're probably referring to.
And this
it's tough because when you talk about a 4-hour version, you're rounding up in either case. You're talking
you're rounding
one or the other. Well, and I was looking at how many different versions of this film were, and I'm like, holy crap, this is like Metropolis for crying out loud. For how many versions of this movie have been cut. You know, and I think this version, I like this version quite a bit. I just from what you were saying, Joe, for what they may have cut, I'm good not seeing those because the majority of this film moves to where, yeah, it is 3 hours and 49 minutes, but and I watched down it, I did it all in one sitting. But in all honesty, I don't think until I got to like after the intermission, just because I wasn't really looking at the clock because the film was moving for me I'm like, you watch this and it moves to where there's something going forward. There's something progressing either with characters or plot. And you're like, okay, we're here now. Okay, we're here. And then we get to intermission. And I look and go, wait, that's been like 2.5 hours. What? You know, because
Richard just sent the Treat Williams scene. I've seen the scene, but I'm wondering if you've seen the version of the movie with that scene cut back in, or when you're talking about watching the 4-hour version, you're talking about the version we're talking about, which is 3 hours and 49 minutes. Or if you've seen the 4 hour and 10 minute or 4 hour and 11 minute.
It's a 4 hour and 11 minute version, which
we're trying to figure out if you're rounding up or down here when you're saying 4 hours.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ian.
I want to ask, because it's the 40th anniversary of this movie, right? Came out in
it is.
It is. Look at it. I didn't even plan it that way. I just picked it because it was about Prohibition. Didn't think about the 40th anniversary.
Is it, and Joe, maybe you can speak to this, but is it because I'm assuming based on the reviews that we've discussed that it was critically panned when it came out, and because it's not discussed in the same kind of pantheon as like The Godfather or Goodfellas, I can't imagine it did very well. Are we talking about a bomb here?
I don't think it did well financially either. I think it's because the reviews are so bad. But the reviews that were coming out, some of them did actually specify the version they saw at Cannes was great. The version released in theaters is crap. Some of them did specify that.
Because I'm wondering, like, I feel like even though I'm kind of iffy on it, and that's probably because I've only watched it the one time, I think it does demand repeat viewings. That, you know, this would be the perfect opportunity for like a 40th anniversary, like 4K or something, or some kind of a presentation where you've got like a bundle with like all the different cuts on it or something. But this film isn't even really in the conversation.
Yeah, it was
a bomb. It might be a 4K. I think there was a 4K.
It was a financial bomb.
But yeah, it's not something that it's well regarded among critics, but not really among audiences. Because I think also the other thing is the runtime is so monstrous. I think people don't want to. I think people are going to look at it like, when am I going to sit down for 4 hours to watch this movie? I did it today, but I also love this movie. So
yeah, I did it. I did it last night. So, but
if we go to the theater to see it for 4 hours, driving there, then driving back, and paying for parking and gas. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would say there is. Yeah, it's a commitment, but I feel like if you did a really nice restoration, you could do do a boutique theater thing like the Music Box or other art house things. Yeah, I mean, I would go to see that, and you can even have like the intermission thing, like where mercifully I watched this on, I think, Plex or something like that. So the intermission was literally like a minute long. But yeah, I could totally see, you know, I don't know if you can go back and artificially like put the intermission earlier, because to Mark's point, it is a bit ridiculous to get 2.5 hours into a movie and then it's like, okay, now you can pee. But yeah, I feel like you could make this into a big kind of event movie, because as we've seen,
you get Robert De Niro to come out, you know, do a Q&A, or James Woods.
He did. He did a Q&A.
Still alive, you know. So many people. William Forsythe.
Yeah, De Niro did a Q&A for Megalopolis, and he wasn't even in the damn movie.
Not even in the damn movie.
Half that Q&A, they didn't even talk about Megalopolis. They just talked about like The Godfather and politics, and then like for the last 5 minutes, they talked about Megalopolis.
To fill in the blanks, if you go by a couple of different websites, the budget was $30 million. In 1984. Okay, so that's
amazing. That movie looks way more expensive than $30 million.
Box office, $5.5 million.
There you go. I remember, you know, the first time I was going to watch it because the video store that was on my corner had the, you know, the 2 VHS tape set of it, and I remember telling one of my older cousins I want to watch it. I want to rent it and watch it because I'd seen The Godfather and Godfather 2 and all this stuff, and he told me he saw it in the theater and it sucks. And I'm assuming, of course, I assume he must have seen the 140-minute version that everybody hates.
Yeah.
That's got to be the one he saw.
And keeping our tradition here on the Spoiler Room of money conversion, as we have this entire year, because we've been covering such older films and such, $30 million in 1984 is $90 million today.
It's still not like...
looks like 120.
It's still not something a studio would consider huge anymore, because they're in the they're in the 200-300 millions at this point.
But it put it in perspective that it only made 15 mil at the box office. We're talking Madam Web numbers here, so you know. We're
Leone died shortly afterwards.
The Lad Company caused it themselves because they wanted to cut it down, and then bad word of mouth got out. I don't know how well a 4-hour version would have done in theaters, but I probably would have done better just based on word of mouth.
Leone wanted to split it up into 2 movies originally.
Yeah, but that's when he had like a 300-something page screenplay.
Yeah.
So it's not a new idea, folks.
Yeah.
No, I just the dark side of me just imagined like the 2-parter, like he cuts it at the end of the car scene we've been discussing. Not the train scene, but just at the end of the car scene. Oh, God. Like, come back for part 2.
And there's just all that beautiful Sergio Leone music after that horrible scene.
And by the way, that score probably would have won an Oscar that year.
Oh yeah,
but they missed the deadline to turn. The Lad Company missed the deadline to turn it in, so there was no nomination or anything. And I love this score so much.
Yeah,
maybe there's a reason we don't hear about the Lad Company much anymore.
Yeah.
I've never heard about them before.
They also put out Police Academy, the original Police Academy, a couple other movies here and there, mostly in the 80s. Their logo was like, it looked like an Apple, an old Mac, like kind of creating like a tree, like a green tree.
Yeah, I remember it.
I've seen it a few times, but Police Academy and this movie, the only 2 movies I could think of off the top of my head that had it.
Yeah, from Police Academy to Once Upon a Time in America. What a transition.
That's where they got the 90 million, was Police Academy. A huge hit.
Yeah, but both have good soundtracks. I love the March for Police Academy. That's still a great with the piccolo and that. Some other films put out by the Lad Company, Chariots of Fire, Body Heat.
Oh, okay. Great.
Blade Runner, Night Shift, The Right Stuff, Police Academy, Police Academy 2, the Brady Bunch movie, Braveheart, Brady sequel. Gone Baby Gone was the last Lad Company.
So they were around until the late aughts. Okay.
So they didn't do a huge amount, but what they came out with, a lot of them are more hits than misses with it. They did do The Phantom, which we covered here. Check it out, folks, in one of our archive on the Spoiler Room. We did cover The Phantom.
In the 90s?
And if you're a young writer who likes it, it's going into the public domain soon. So.
Yeah, 96.
Yeah, I saw that in theaters as a kid, and I don't remember shit about that movie.
A Very Brady sequel was in 96, and then they didn't do another film for 9 years until they did An Unfinished Life, and then they did Gone Baby Gone, and that was it. So they did like 2 movies after 96.
Yeah. It's funny when you mentioned Blade Runner, and then Joe mentioned the growing apple tree. Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that look, because I was thinking about it. I'm like, was that the thing I saw in Blade Runner? And then you mentioned Blade Runner. I'm like, oh yeah, now I remember.
Yeah.
Oh, lads.
Yeah, I love the score. If you ever get a chance to, I think it's on Apple Music. I don't know if it's on Spotify. I have it on CD.
Yeah.
But the score to this is beautiful, and
I'm impressed with Ennio because it's still got his signature stuff in it, but it was fitting for the movie. It didn't feel like a Western score overlaid on top of urban action. You know, it felt appropriate.
It felt like he was doing something different. It wasn't like the same thing he always does, you know.
I mean, the instrumentation was the same, but the melodies and the themes in it are definitely different in it.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the only film I can think of where, you know, one of the songs used in the score is actually part of the plot, because, like I said, Deborah's theme is partially the song, you know, that translates to "Pretty Little Poppy," and I think that does actually figure into the plot somewhat. I don't know if it's meant. I think it's meant as a clue. I don't know if it is. I think it's one of those. If you know, you know. If you don't, doesn't matter.
It was.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, now I do have to rewatch it again to connect the dots to where it was a dream, because Leone said himself that was kind of what he was going for.
I mean, you know, I think some of the better films out there can be subject to interpretation. But it really, even me, not knowing any trivia about that or what you guys have mentioned, Mike or Joe, that was the impression, though. And if that's what he was kind of going for, then Leone, you did it, because I was watching it near the end and I'm like, this isn't a JR in the shower, is it? and it's funny hearing you guys mention that, you know, Joe mentioned, especially for you watching it so many times, that your theory, I'm like, okay, maybe I wasn't quite so far off.
This is not based on anything except me watching it. Like, I don't know if his intention was that it's definitely, there's definitely themes of loyalty, friendship, guilt, all that stuff. But I don't, this is my interpretation from how I'm reading it. And it could just be me inserting myself into Noodles' mindset. You know, I mean,
well, I mean, if the kind of sort of quote we've been bandying about Leone saying that he was kind of going for this dreamlike quality, then that suggests two things. One, that there was an intention and that you're not reading something, you know, crazy into it, but also that, you know, when an artist says, yeah, that's kind of what I was going for, that's almost admitting that he didn't quite succeed, because it should be on its face.
Right.
You know, the audience should be able to go in and say, okay, here's where it kind of goes off the rails, like the Jacob's Ladder situation. But I think, you know, you can be a master in one genre or genres and then kind of like need to recruit some help if you're going to step outside that, you know, go outside that lane. You know, we mentioned, you know, some Gialli, you know, I'm thinking like Dario Argento. That's someone who can weave like these crazy batshit narratives into somewhat reality. And there's very often these kind of distinct breaks from reality where we're getting into this dreamlike quality or descents into madness. I think Leone needed to bring in someone to help weave that into a mob story or, you know, a New York crime story, because it doesn't quite work, I think, as evidenced by the fact that we all have kind of our own interpretations here. I'm fine with movies that can be interpreted multiple ways. Where I run into a block is where I feel like the filmmaker didn't quite know how to land the plane, so it leaves everything open to interpretation, which means that it's kind of like, well, I can't really get invested because the movie doesn't know what it is.
Well, I'm going to say right now that not knowing much about the film, because when I pick these films for the theme months, I just look at the titles and what their synopsis is. I don't exactly pay attention to the year till later. And especially if it's a film I haven't seen before. Watching this, if you didn't tell me it was 84, I would have thought this was from the 70s. Because of the way it's directed, and especially the ending. The ending with the freeze frame and the credits in it. I mean, that the whole last, I'd say 15 minutes of this really felt more like an ending to a 70s film where a lot of them went a little more abstract with their ending a bit, to where you're like, they either ran out of money or they were trying to be artistic. And at the end, you're like, what? And then you just freeze frame and the movie just ends. And you're just like, wait, Wait, that's the end. What?
Even the way it's shot, it uses a lot of wide shots for conversations, and it doesn't use a lot of OTSs that movies of that era were kind of framed like. And even the color was a lot flatter, and like New York looks really gray in that movie. It looks very
brown.
Yeah,
I lived in New York during that time period. That's just how it looked.
You were around in the 1930s? Oh, no.
I mean in the 80s when this film was made.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just what New York looked like back then.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the Death Wish 3 New York,
Yeah.
It's literally the same time period. When I was saying earlier that this is totally my interpretation, I didn't mean so much the opium thing as much as I meant the significance of what Max and Noodles' relationship is, and what Deborah's relationship is. That's what I meant by that's totally my interpretation. But yeah, you mentioned Argento is even somebody who came out of Leone, because he was working with Leone early in his early days in the industry. So it's kind of Leone and Marco Brava that gave us Dario Argento.
Could have called him up.
Was it Godfather 3 that was the flashback?
What's up?
Was Godfather 3 the one that took place in Italy where they did the flash?
Two. Godfather 2?
Oh, that was 2.
Where they go back to Vito Corleone.
That kept popping into my brain too when I was watching Once Upon a Time in America. Was Godfather 2 approach to a similar subject, though that was more linear, but still it was like, I wonder if
that didn't have as much jumping around because you didn't have a third time period in that one.
Right.
This takes place in, the best I could gather, 1921, 1933, and 1968. So there's there's a lot of time jumping in this one.
Yeah, but it's still handled better than what's his name? Never mind. No, I'm not going to say it because I'm going to have a whole bunch of his fans come out and go, "Oh!" But no,
he's one of those, and there's another one that I try not to speak of because his fans are crazy and will threaten you. Not Nolan's, the other guy.
Yeah, the other guy who did superhero films. No,
that's what I thought you were talking about. Yeah,
but I mean, though you see the influences, you look at this film, and you're right. This is one of those that, especially for '84's movie-going mainstream audience, I can understand them trying to want to bring something to them and cut it down. This film does not scream, "Oh, hey, blockbuster hit here," with your audience. It really feels like this would have been more suited towards one of those, we're going to release it to enough screens to qualify for the Oscars. Okay. That's what we're doing.
But then we're going to cut it. Then we're going to cut it to ribbons to where it's not going to get any Oscars. It's completely counterintuitive. If anything could go, I'd say some of the union stuff could probably be cut down a little bit.
Yeah.
There's not 2 hours worth of cutting to this movie where it still makes sense.
You could take the union stuff out and still have it make sense, mean something.
Yeah, or leave like very little of it, and it'll probably still be fine.
Up to the point, you could leave the point of where you see him supposedly in modern day Treat Williams with the limp or whatnot, and you see him when he's getting the gasoline poured on him, and that's the most you would have to do. You don't necessarily need the hospital scene,
the shootout,
and the shootout where he's getting shot with the union part. I think if you just left those two scenes, you could trim that out. But
and even the Danny Aiello stuff with the babies could probably go.
With the babies, with the shuffling of the babies.
That could
I would have done that scene. I love that scene.
I love the scene, but if you took it out, you probably wouldn't affect the plot very much.
No.
I love the scene personally. I think it's hilarious, especially when Patsy's like, I may have accidentally thrown out the list with the coats. Fucking great.
Well, I love that
some of them are going to get the good life, some of them are going to get it up the ass.
Yeah, and that's why I think that scene is important. It doesn't drive the plot, but it talks about the character of these people. And I think that was my big disappointment. I think you cut Treat Williams completely out of this movie because when he pops up, and this might just be because over the decades I've seen him in a lot of stuff. I like him as an actor, so I don't know that he was as significant in 1984, where it's like you're expecting something if Treat Williams is going to be in a movie. But I was expecting him to be a character who's more integral to the plot than he's in like literally 2 scenes and then like a television appearance and then some kind of a mention. Like I feel like once you introduce him and that whole union mob boss kind of connection, you make the movie about that, or you take it out, or you find a way to weave it into the goings on of our gang here, where it's kind of like in the shadows off to the side, but where it all still makes sense and warrants him being in there. Because as much as I like the scene with the gasoline and all that stuff, I would have given all that up to flesh out more of what's really going on with some of these characters and their relationships.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And I think we're going to end it here tonight. We've already gone.
We've gone almost 2 hours already.
We've gone almost 2 hours.
We should go 4:11.
We go 4:11. Let's do
that. No, that would be the worst cut of this conversation.
That would be the worst.
I think I have this.
It's just going to end with a freeze frame of us exhausted. Yeah.
Yeah, all of us like.
I think I have the screenplay somewhere on one of my laptops. I got to see if I can find it.
So we're going to end it here tonight, folks. Hope you enjoyed this extended version. But I wanted to do the extended because, as you can tell, there's a lot to talk about with this film. And overall, I'll give my final thoughts and then we'll get our panel here. For me, I am very happy I watched it with its runtime. It is not one that you're just going to casually like, hey, I'm going to watch this tonight. And the reason I say that is because the film is really good for the majority of it. I loved it. Nearly all of it. It's when it gets into that obscure ending that it kind of trips over its shoelaces a bit, but it still overall is a film that is good enough to where you can't really put it in the background, because what's going to happen is you put it on in the background, you turn, you're going to catch a scene, and all of a sudden you're going to catch another scene, and all of a sudden 2.5 hours later, whatever you were doing, yeah, good luck, because you've just been pulled into
the kitchen's on fire because you tried to cook while watching this movie.
Right. Right. Because it is one of those that, for the runtime that it is, for me, I was impressed of how swiftly it moved overall and how I was invested in these characters and I was intrigued of where it was going, and if you look at the director, it explains a lot of why you feel that way. So Mike, what's your final thought with Once Upon a Time?
I've always enjoyed it. I've never seen the theatrical version because, well, I've just heard nothing but horrible things about it. But now that gives me an incentive as a film critic to check it out. When I first saw it, I thought, oh, wow, every scene fits beautifully. When I rewatched it, the movie felt a little convoluted, but at the same time, there is a thorough structure to it where you kind of see the relationship of these characters over the years, and you really feel that time pass by thanks to that length. And I think it's kind of like a beautiful homage, it's finding beauty in ugliness, because you have the mob who's killing and who's raping, but they're playing Sergio Leone's melancholic score, and it's absorbing you in the scene. And it's really a movie about consequences, about what happens if you join the mob. You die either young and early, or you die an old man filled with regret and loneliness. So, it's really it's a film that has a lot of layers to it. It's like some critics called it like the Italian Godfather. Although Godfather is Italian, but the Italian Godfather. But I don't think it's quite that level. But it's certainly impressive. It's funny how Robert De Niro has been in nothing but like gangster movies that all turn into classics, from The Godfather to this film, to Goodfellas. Thank you. Yeah.
And have you guys seen A Bronx Tale?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
they were actually when I was
different kind of De Niro in that movie. Yeah,
when I was a kid, they actually were doing auditions for young Colodro at my in my neighborhood. I wanted to go. My parents wouldn't let me, but that would have been so cool.
Yeah.
But Ian, your final thoughts with Once Upon a Time, since this was your first watch?
Yeah, Joe, you mentioned a kitchen fire. And that reminded me of one of the many scenes I'd forgotten about because this movie is very damn long. But no, towards the beginning, they torch a newsstand,
Yes.
Yes.
and that's beautiful. That's one of the many reasons, and it's a roundabout way of me getting to my final thought. I want to see this movie on the big screen because watching that newsstand, I was watching on my laptop. I'm like, this is beautiful. I can only imagine what it's like, a million feet tall. But it's yeah, as much as I've been bagging on it, it's just my frustration at feeling like I got 90% of the way with a movie, but then I just couldn't quite bring it home emotionally for myself, which maybe is kind of the point because Noodles is sort of that way too. He's not really an emotional being. He's a being of passion, and there's two different things. Yeah, I dug it mostly. I will watch it again, and maybe I'll have a greater appreciation for it. I'll watch the theatrical cut at some point, and that'll probably solidify the director's cut as a masterpiece. Yeah, can't wait.
Joe, go ahead, sir.
Well, I've always seen this film as a meditation on grief and regret and remorse and all that stuff. And I think it's one of those movies where I feel when I sit down and watch it, I feel like I'm reading a great novel because I do feel like we are. We literally are in the case of Noodles. We are watching a character's entire lifetime, play out on screen, whether you believe the 68 stuff is real or whether, what portions of it. I've always felt that this was one of those films that I consider very moody because it really is. And it's one that I've always gravitated to because I always watch every time I've watched it since the first time I watched it as a teenager to now, I always find something a little different in it that I didn't notice before. And that's one of the things that I like about Sergio Leone in general. But this movie especially, it's my favorite Leone movie, which I know seems almost like sacrilege to some people because this is a guy that made The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and A Fistful of Dollars. I absolutely love this movie to the point where I've seen it a dozen times. I've read the screenplay. I've sought out interviews with the filmmakers, actors who would talk about it. James Woods talking about how Leone was shooting one of these wide shots and needed it to rain at a specific time. And he's like, just at the right time. It's as though God was like, yes, I'm giving it to you, Sergio. It started raining just when the maestro wanted it to. So, maybe those also color my judgment, because I think of it as, think of the movie magic behind it. But to me, it's actually the opposite of Mark's opinion on the last couple scenes. The scene, where Noodles and Deborah see each other in her dressing room, and the scene with Max / Senator Bailey. I love those scenes more than any other scene in the movie, and I think it's because I feel like those actually hammer home the idea. Also the opium dream, because also one thing we didn't mention, it's 1968. Yes, there's no internet, but you couldn't find a picture of Senator Bailey.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. There's that whole thing about how Max faked his own death. We didn't get into it, but there were these corpses on the grounds. There were 3 bodies.
One of them.
How did he fake his own? Yeah. Huh?
One of them was burnt to shit. That was his.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Well, he said everything was in on it from the mob and everything. So the police were in on it. So who knows?
But did they find a freshly burnt corpse? Or did they torch someone and lay him out there like that? I'm trying to imagine how that whole scene plays out. Did they have a third person? Because he would have. Did Max escape after allegedly going crazy and shooting at the cops? Was that all fake?
But then he would have gotten his friends killed.
Right, but Patsy and Cockeye, where they're like, who is this third person that's pretending to be Max? Or, hey, Max, where are you going? Oh, my gosh, why are they shooting at us? I don't know. The whole thing doesn't make sense, which, again, I'm starting to lean more into your version, Joe, of this being a dream, but that's only because the reality feels nonsensical and poorly written.
But I feel it's more that this is about a man who is seeking redemption for accidentally killing his friends and driving away possibly the only woman who ever actually loved him. And this is a guy who, at the age of his late 20s, we're going to say, is facing the rest of his life alone. He's destroyed every relationship he's ever had, all in a couple of short weeks, and that's why I think the everything in it, the forgiving nature of Deborah and all that stuff, him never seeing Senator Bailey, I think it all ties back together to this to the 60s portion not being real, because also she's a famous actress, but they don't know it.
Yeah.
He doesn't know she's a famous actress.
Well, actress. She was staged.
She could be Broadway. She could be Broadway famous. Yeah.
She was staged. So she was staged. So that could be, when they say actress. But no,
I absolutely adore this movie. It's possibly might be my favorite movie ever. I don't know.
And that's awesome. And for me, I'm really glad I saw it, because it is a solid film, and it shows how you do nonlinear appropriately overall. And I guess, we're gonna go 4 hours. No, but you guys mentioned about the forgiveness part. It would explain a bit of that dialogue at the end that Bailey / Max Bailey gives. We'll call him Max Bailey, gives to Noodles. It's not just I would only feel comfortable if you did it, but he talks about how I did all this, and I'm like, it almost felt out of character for Max to be sitting there going, you're the good guy, I'm the bad guy in this.
Yeah.
Shoot me because I'm the bad guy in this. When we know Noodles is a bad guy.
Yeah, this is somebody wrestling with guilt.
But it fits that scene, and then, as we mentioned earlier in the episode here, Deborah's reaction too. So it does lean towards that. I'm kind of with Ian. I think I need to watch it a little bit more, because another time, not right now, I got to give some time to digest, but I'll probably watch it again just to see, especially with everything we've talked about tonight. But I can see more and more to that being the dream that we're catching here with the 68 stuff. And it doesn't make it bad, but it does make it feel more clunky at the end. It does. So there you have it, folks. Thank you so much for listening and watching us ramble for 2 hours about a 4-hour film. But there's a lot to talk about, as you can tell, and unpack, and I hope it helps you seek it out. Now, speaking of seeking out, this is where I give the license to shill to my panel so they could tell you where you could find their stuff at when they're not gracing us here. So Mike, go ahead.
Sure. You can find me on X at YPA Reviews. Also, if you look up YPA Reviews, or you'll probably agree, on YouTube, you can find my videos there. And at ypareviews.com, I have my newest written reviews. I'm seeing Joker and Saturday Night this week, so keep your eyes peeled for those written reviews. And I also have a video up. It's about 43 minutes long of me talking to a comedian about a movie he thought was overlooked, and that was Meet Joe Black. I just thought it was okay, but but yep, that's my stuff.
Wasn't that another 3-hour movie or something like that?
It was a 3-hour movie. All these 3, and don't worry, there's going to be more of them coming up.
Joe, go ahead, sir. License to shill is yours.
Joe Rendezzo. I'm with the Literary License Podcast. We just started our Bela Lugosi series, which we're going through the rise and fall of Bela Lugosi. Keith asked what filmmakers everyone wants to cover. Sean chose David Lynch, so we're going through all of David Lynch's films. Keith himself chose Paul Verhoeven, so we're going through all the Paul Verhoeven films over this season. And I chose Bela Lugosi because I feel he's been overlooked the last couple of years. So there's that. I guess that's all I have to show right now, because anything else that's going on? I worked on the Halloween special of The Last Drive-In, so that's coming out soon. But that's they'll be able to push that better than I ever will.
Ian, my friend, go ahead, sir.
Well, I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com and right here on YouTube. Do interviews and podcasts and movie reviews and roundtables. And this Wednesday night at 8 Central, I'll be doing a very intimate, read small panel on Megalopolis, the Francis Ford Coppola film, which has come up a couple of times here. Yes, I will be competing with the Joker screening that's happening in Chicago, but yeah. So come check it out, hang out. Very big opinions on the film, and yeah, I'm
Will there be
excited to have that
singing
conversation.
Wednesday? Will there be singing Wednesday like in Joker 2? Will there be singing?
You know what? It's funny because I saw the trailer on TV with my wife last night, and I was like, I can't believe that's a musical. She's like, "That's a musical?" I'm like, "Yeah."
Well,
right?
if you watch
Because they're doing their best to like hide the fact they're singing here. I've seen one trailer where they highlight the musical aspect of it, and the rest of it is like, "Hey, look, it's more of the same."
Well, they did
So I
that
don't know
with
what that says
Wicked.
about it.
Literally Wicked, a movie that's based off of a Broadway musical, and the two trailers, the latest trailer I saw in the theater this past weekend, didn't have a single musical number featured at all in the film, and it only had Gravity as a song over the trailer and no performances whatsoever. And I'm like, it's literally a musical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the musical is still sort of a genre people get turned off from, and that's why they do it.
Yeah,
which is weird because if you're making a musical, advertise it as a musical. But I don't know if that's Warner Brothers' decision where they're like, no, make it look like Joker. And then they come into like, what if people come into this movie and they have no idea it's going to be a musical? Based on
they're going to have massive walkouts.
You're going to have massive walkouts. So thank you for no one walking out tonight. Thank you to our live viewers for listening to us talk about this. Yes, specialmarkproductions.com for all your Movie Man needs. But I've got to plug the Sawdust City Fright Fest is coming up in 11 days in beautiful Oshkosh, Wisconsin at the Time Community Theater. 2 days of independent films. We got 19 shorts, 3 features. And speaking of the features, I will have interviewed Chad Farron, who we've talked about a number of times before. I've interviewed. We'll be interviewing him about his film, The Old Ones, which is one of the 3 features. And I've already interviewed the director of Purgatory Jack, Jason Butler, and I interviewed Robert Love and Christina Bryan, who are involved in A Time to Die, which was a Wisconsin-produced feature. All 3 of those features will be showing at the Sawdust City Fright Fest. Go to sawdustcityfrightfest.com for information, or the Time Community Theater webpage, where you can even reserve a seat. It's a small time community thing, but they've got seat reservations you could do for the festival. So it should be a lot of fun. There's going to be Q&As there. And don't let me being there deter you from showing up. Please come. A lot of great indie cinema and celebration tradition that we do at the time. So thank you very much, folks. And don't forget to tune in next month. October is horror spooky season, and it's Maniac month here in the spoiler room. We're watching 4 films, all with the title Maniac. Yes, that's the only word in the title. Maniac is the title for all 4 films that we'll be covering in October. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe, like, and all those bells and whistles. And until next time, remember, stay safe out there and have a good night, everyone.